Hola, mi gente. I am going to be recording a solo episode, first time in a very long time. And I figured, let me tell y'all about the tea so that we can talk about my new foray into home ownership. I'm super excited. I haven't recorded a solo episode in forever, y'all. So this is going to be a treat. I'm going to tell you all about my home buying journey. Well, technically, this is the third time because I already own property in Puerto Rico, but this is like the second attempt at my primary residence. And so if you know my story, you'll know that my first adventure into homeownership was a shit show. And if you want the full details of that story, pick up a copy of my book, Financially Lit, because I detail all that, all the tea as to why I hated homeownership with my first attempt and then how I've rehabilitated my relationship with real estate. So yeah, let's dive right in. So I actually just closed on Monday. So October 28th, which happened so serendipitously to be the 50th anniversary of the Equal Credit Opportunity Act, which, if you do not know, that is the landmark legislation that actually gave women permission legally to open lines of credit without a man, whether that is a male family member or spouse, husband, whatever. Up until 1974, women could be denied credit. So we're talking everything from credit cards to mortgages to any type of loan. The bank could just be like, no, we're not doing it unless you have a male cosigner. That was 50 years ago, y'all. My mom was a teenager when this legislation was passed. So just the fact that I, as a unmarried woman, get to own not one, but two pieces of real estate in this golden age, it's not lost on me. The privilege that this is and how much of like our success is just based on fucking timing. You know, like if you were born back in the day, if you were born at a different time, you'd be living a whole ass different life. And so that's just crazy. So I picked up the keys on Monday, signed my life away, and I bought my primary home because up until this point, when I sold my house in New Jersey and started my financial independence journey, that was all part of the plan. I wanted to get rid of that home, get out of debt, pay off my student loans, pay off my credit cards. Home ownership was just not aligned with my goals at the time. And so I bought my first home in 2016, sold it in 2019, and I've been renting ever since then. So ever since I moved to Florida, essentially, I think I've moved like 4 or 5 times in the past 6 years. And your girl was tired. Okay? Your girl was fucking tired of putting shit in boxes and moving around. And obviously now, as an expectant mom, I have had an epiphany in life. You know, like I'm just ready to settle down, to have roots. Obviously, a lot of that has to do with just becoming a parent. It's a way more stable environment when you can own a home and you know where your kids are going to go to school and that nobody can like kick you out and you just, you know. So that was one of my main drivers for wanting to take this step at this time. Now, as a millennial, you know, we've gotten the short end of the stick when it comes to housing pretty much since we became adults. Because if you're like me, I'm 39. I graduated 6 months before the Great Recession. And so I saw the housing market collapse. I saw the chaos that was. I was 22 at the time. So some people were able to take advantage of like really cheaply priced homes because the housing market crashed, essentially. I was not one of those people. Like 22 years old, I'm not thinking about buying a fucking house back in 2008. So older folks were able to take advantage of those opportunities, but millennials, for the most part, we got screwed. As we are aging and as we are coming of age, 2020 rolls around. There's another global economic crisis that now causes the housing market to spike. Home prices are higher than ever before. Interest rates have gone up and all that stuff. I'm just setting the stage for y'all to understand that, like, if you haven't been able to accomplish home ownership, especially as a millennial, understand that there's been a lot of fuckery going on for the greater part of over a decade that has made this process very difficult for us. And I have had stops and starts, just like all of you in the past couple of years, trying to time things, trying to figure out like, oh, is the housing market going to go down? Oh, what's going to happen with interest rates? La-di-la-la-la. I finally said, this is something that I'm just going to have to do, whatever current environment we are in, right? And so understanding that like you can't time the market, I think that was the first thing that I needed to just like accept that, yeah, it would have been great to like buy property 10, 15 years ago, especially here in Florida. I mean, even when I moved here in 2018, like you get a bomb ass house for like under $300,000. Now, girl, you buying a shack. Okay. And that's the case with most places in the country, you know. This year, I really came to the realization that I'm like, you know what? It is what it is. I'm just going to do this. One of the things that I started to do to prepare for home ownership was saving a substantial down payment. That is one of the hardest things to do, but there are options because, you know, I think most people think that 20% is the default. Like you need to put down 20%. No, you don't. I put down, I want to say like around 6 or 7%. I have to do the like final calculations, but I did around a 6 to 7% down payment because I was just not going to do 20%. We're not, you know, it's not that serious. If you can get into a house with a smaller down payment, do it. You know, yeah, sure, fine. You have to pay like private mortgage insurance. But for me, that cost was not something that was going to be the limiting factor for buying a home. So I decided to focus on upping my cash reserve this whole year. I also wanted to have like 2 full years of entrepreneurship income because when you're trying to get a mortgage as a self-employed person, that is what they look at. They want to look at the consistency of your business. They want to make sure that if they're lending you money, that you're actually going to be able to pay it back. And, you know, obviously when you own a business, your income can be all over the place, unlike somebody who has a W-2 job and is just getting the same amount of money every 2 weeks or whatever. I knew that this year, you know, I was going to have those solid records. And from a paperwork perspective, I felt like confident that I would get approved for a mortgage. And so the hunt began. Actually, I really started thinking about this in earnest, like beginning of August, because my current lease was going to be up November 30th. And I was like, I don't really want to stay in the city that I'm in. And I definitely don't want to sign another year-long lease. My daughter is due in January. So I was like, yeah, I want to just give myself enough time to like actually make this happen, right? So I started looking in August, found 2 properties that I liked and went to go and see both of them. And the first one was the one that I decided to pursue. Now, I do think that in this journey, I had a little bit of luck because of the time that I started looking. So if y'all will remember, back in August, there was a very important meeting that people kept talking about with regards to the Federal Reserve. So there was this big buzz that, okay, the economy is stable, inflation is starting to go down, the Federal Reserve is probably going to lower interest rates. I was paying attention, y'all. Like, this is a good part of keeping involved with the economic news, like staying in touch with what's going on, because you might be able to like take advantage. I put in an offer, I want to say like 3 days before the Federal Reserve met and decided to slash interest rates by 0.5 percentage point. So I got a pretty fucking decent rate for where we are right now. Actually, interest rates have gone up since I locked in my mortgage. So I'm actually locked in at 5.5%, which is not a number that you will get right now unless you buy down your rate. But there was this weird little window between September 15th-ish to the end of September where interest rates were lower. And so I locked in my rate at that point. That's where I ended up closing at. And I'm really happy with that rate because it really put the monthly payment in a place where like I'm very comfortable with it. If it had been even, you know, just a little bit higher, I would have just been like, damn, like this sucks. But also, interest rates fluctuate. And so I had to remind myself, like, even if 5.5% is like not ideal, obviously I would have loved to buy a house when it was like 2% during the pandemic. Interest rates can change. And so I didn't want that to be a limiting factor. I figured, you know what, at the end of the day, like if they do lower rates again, I can always refinance. But this house had everything that I wanted: the location, school system, amenities, the age of the home. All the major stuff was, in great working order, no renovations required. It was just ticking off all the boxes. And I said, I'm in love with the house. I'm not in love with the interest rate, but I'm going to buy the house and then we can deal with the interest rate later. And I think that's a good perspective to have, because I think about even my own parents when they bought their home. I feel like they told me they were somewhere around like 8 or 9% back in the late 90s. And so if you think about that, it's like, oh shit, it could be much worse. Okay. And let's be real. Back in the 1980s, interest rates were double digits. Okay. Interest rates were like approaching credit card interest rates. So it's important to have a historical perspective to really understand, like, is this a good rate or not? Anywho, I put in the offer, which luckily, because so many people were waiting to see what the Fed was going to do, there was sort of a lull in the housing market, and I did not have any competing offers. Like, nobody had made an offer on this house, which if we had rewound the clock about fucking a year ago, honey, even just like a year ago, there was bidding wars, right? People were like losing their minds, paying over asking, like doing the fucking most. I was like, I'm not participating in that bullshit. Okay. I'm not going to be paying you more than you're asking for your house. So bye. Miss me with that. But when I made an offer on this home, there was nobody to compete with. So it worked out nicely because I actually got to negotiate down the original asking price, ended up saving about $17,000 off of the original asking price, which chef's kiss. Love that. We love to save money. The sellers were actually very accommodating for the few requests that I made. I asked for some seller credits to fix like garage door that's dented. They actually ended up covering the cost of my realtor as well. So if you guys don't know, there was a settlement with the National Association of Realtors, I want to say like maybe the beginning of this year, where now when you buy a home, you have to be represented by an agent that has an exclusive agreement with you. And then the seller has their agent. And so you as a buyer typically now are expected to pay anywhere between a 2 to 3% commission to your realtor. But I actually ended up negotiating that the sellers would pay my realtor for facilitating this purchase. So that saved me like almost 20 grand. Love that, right? So all the numbers were working out. You know what I mean? Everything for this transaction was like very painless. I think honestly, one of the reasons why things moved along so effortlessly too is because I did do some digging. I really like to ask or like try to figure out why somebody's selling a house. What's the motivation behind this? And they ended up finding out that it was because the couple was getting divorced. If you've ever had to like, get divorced and split assets and things like that, you know that one of the things that has to be squared away when you're getting a divorce is like, what are we doing with this house? Are we selling it? Is one person retaining ownership? Blah, blah, blah. So they were eager to get out of the house. And I think that's part of why it was a very smooth transaction. They were just like, yeah, we'll do whatever the fuck you want. Just buy the house. So made an offer. It was accepted, did the inspection. Everything came back fine. I mean, the place has a brand new roof that was installed like 3 months ago. All of the major appliances, utilities, HVAC, all that stuff is in great working order. The house is only 20 years old, which is something that was really important to me. As someone who used to own a home in New Jersey that was built in the 1930s, I said, never fucking again will I buy a house that is this old. Okay. Some people love them, that like classic old construction. I'm not that girl. I like shit that's not going to break. And a 20-year-old house is a very different experience than one that is over 100 years old. So I said, even the inspector said the house has been very well taken care of, no major issues. Then it was a matter of the financing. Now, this was my first foray into financing a real estate purchase as a self-employed person, because when I bought my property in Puerto Rico, I paid cash. I do not have a mortgage on my property in Puerto Rico. The only expenses that I have there are property tax, obviously utilities, and my insurance, okay, and my HOA fee. Obviously, when you're buying real estate with cash, it's like wham bam. I mean, I made an offer and like had the keys 9 days later because you're not doing any paperwork. You're just literally like wiring money here. Here you go. So this process I knew was going to be a little bit more intense. And it was, but honestly, I was kind of surprised by how much I had worked myself up in my head about how difficult it was going to be. And I think a lot of people who literally don't even have businesses, they're just like, oh my God, it's so hard to get a mortgage when you like work for yourself. And I'm just like, is it? It might have been back in the day, but I feel like with the gig economy now and just like with more people doing freelance work and contract work and having their own businesses, I feel like finally financial institutions are starting to catch up and just realize like, oh shit, not everybody has a fucking W-2 job and entrepreneurs can potentially make a lot of money. So like, why are we going to give them a hard time about buying homes? Hello. Right. So I ended up going with SoFi. So SoFi, I used them for my student loan refinancing back in the day during my debt-free journey. I had great experiences with them for student loan refinancing. And I was like, hey, let me check out their mortgage program because that didn't exist back when I first started working with them. But they have like this great program where I think it's like, if they're late on your mortgage, they'll give you like a $10,000 credit or something. And their customer service has always been great. So I ended up going with them for my lender. And I think the most strenuous thing about the whole process was honestly explaining my business finances, like why they were different from 2022 to 2023. Now let me explain. Okay, so I've been fully self-employed since May of 2021. Right. So 2022 and 2023 are the first 2 years that I have a full tax return just with my 1099 self-employment income. 2022 was a bomb ass year for not just myself, but for a lot of businesses. We were rolling in dough. I had multiple 6-figure profits. Like it was fantastic. Numbers were great. 2023, I ended up the year with like 10K in profits after making like $500,000. And you're probably thinking to yourself, like, what the fuck? Like, what did you do with all this money? So the biggest factor that cut into my profits as a business owner in 2023 was hosting my live event in Puerto Rico. So I actually was over budget with that event. And this is exactly why I didn't do it again this year. I was over budget by over $100,000. We had an amazing event. We sold a shit ton of tickets. But putting together events are expensive as fuck. Okay. And I learned that lesson doing that. When the bank saw the difference between my 2022 tax return that was looking all cute and 2023, and they were like, bitch, why you almost broke? They were like, what happened? Literally, my mortgage officer called me and he's like, what happened? I'm like, I can explain. And so this is why it's important for you to have very meticulous records as a business owner. I had the entire like breakdown of the Excel spreadsheet budget, line by line details of the event so that they could see that this was a one-time occurrence. This is not typical of how my business runs. This is not typical of our financial situation. And I ended up having to write like a letter of explanation, basically stating that like this was a one-time investment, infusion of money into the business for like a marketing and visibility perspective. And it's not something that they can expect going forward, right? Just like this huge loss that's being reported. So luckily, because again, I have very meticulous records and I was able to like demonstrate basically what happened. They were able to recreate it with all my documentation. They were like, okay, all right, cool. I think it was a really good reminder that all you got to do is like be able to explain shit. I think people get freaked out when they think about getting a mortgage, especially as a self-employed person, but letters of explanation can be used to literally explain anything. I had to get one for the condo in Puerto Rico so that they could understand like what my HOA liabilities are, because the HOA of my condo in Puerto Rico has terrible record keeping. Like I keep better records than they do, which is like a fucking shame. But, anytime they had a question about an inquiry on my credit report or something involving my finances, all you had to do is just like write a letter explaining it, have some evidence to back it up, and you're fine. So I submitted all my stuff and I was cleared to close on like the morning of the closing, which was a little chaotic because it was actually supposed to happen the Friday before. I closed on a Monday. I was supposed to be cleared on Friday, but some paperwork got missed between the title company and the mortgage lender. So instead of having like the quintessential closing at the title office where they take a cute little picture with you and your realtor and you have your little sold sign and blah, 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 they actually ended up sending a mobile notary, which I didn't even know was a fucking thing. They sent someone to my house with the big ass packet of paperwork and I signed everything there, and then they shuttled it back to the office. My mortgage was funded and here we are, homeowner again. So your girls got what I would argue is my dream house. Like when I walked into that place, I was just like, first of all, when I walked into the neighborhood, I was like, I can't even fucking believe that. Like little old me from Elizabeth, New Jersey, going to school downtown with all the chaos, has built this life that affords me now this opportunity to live in this beautiful home. I cried. Like I literally cried because I'm just like, who is she? Who is she? And I have to think that little Janice would be really fucking proud of what we've been able to accomplish so far. And so I bought a house, y'all, and I'm really excited about it. And I want to encourage you, if this is something that you want to do, it is not impossible. And I will say that the biggest single thing that I did to make this happen is increase my income, because these home prices are not a joke. These home prices are not going down. I actually literally just spoke to the Deputy Secretary of the U.S. Treasury Department, and that episode is coming out soon on the podcast. And one of the things that we talked about is why home ownership is so out of reach right now for so many people. And one of the biggest factors is there are just not enough homes being built for the number of people that want to buy. And so when we think about the simple laws of supply and demand, as long as there is a shortage in housing, prices will not go down. Do not expect another 2008 because it's not going to happen. We are short at least 5 million homes in this country. And that is going to be a process that requires government incentives for builders. It's going to require time, probably over a decade to resolve. And so if home ownership is something that you want to accomplish in the next 10 years, you're going to have to accept some facts, which is that home prices likely will not budge a lot. Obviously, interest rates can potentially change if the economic situation in this country gets worse. I don't really see a lot of signs that that's going to be the case. So if you want to afford a home in this current environment, the single biggest thing that you can do is learn how to make more money. And if you're listening to this show, you already got one advantage over other people, because that's literally all we talk about on the show. So make sure that you're taking advantage of the resources that I have put together. I'm going to link a freebie in the episode show notes, my free side hustle workbook, so that you can start understanding how you can take your side hustle ideas and actually turn them into a full-fledged side hustle and or full-time business. That is the most important skill you can learn at this time. Learn how to make more money, because shit's just going to be expensive from now on. And that doesn't mean that we have to give up on our financial dreams. That just means, we got to kind of do things a little differently than maybe we were used to in the past. You can check out the video version of this episode on YouTube. Shout out to all the YouTube subscribers who have gotten us monetized after 5 long ass years of plugging away. So excited for that. Yeah, stay tuned for more solo episodes because I got a lot of shit to update you guys on. A lot of stuff. Okay. I've been kind of radio silent because I've been like, nesting pregnant mode. I'm exhausted, not really sleeping. Just kind of got my head down and doing a bunch of shit. But it's time we catch up. So hope you guys are doing well. And until next time, stay poderosa.